Okay, let's try that again. We think that has resolved itself. Thank you very much to colleagues who've been furiously working away. Apologies to anyone watching online who had a horrible noise coming out of their computer. We think we've resolved it. So, I was just concluding my answer about saying it's a really good suggestion about a friends group. We really want to make sure that the voices of the users of that building, the people who love that building, whether they're theatre users, performers, audience members, library users, people who use the gallery, that their views are a part of the ongoing process. So thank you very much for coming today and asking your questions. Okay, Mr. Johnson.
All right. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Okay. It's quite loud, isn't it? Maybe I'll be a little away from the mic. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for allowing my presence here, and a belated Happy New Year. And thank you, councillors, officers, etc. And Tom, I hope you weren't too traumatised by the Stannington result last week. Are you okay? Bit of a blow,
It's so good to know that you're looking after my welfare, Mr. Johnson. So I'm very grateful, but
I want my council
feeling very chipper. Sheffield's a city on the up, so all good.
Touché. Okay, so the first theme, and I've organised my questions by theme, as I often do, and I hope people find it relevant. Contract management. So this is a newish one for me, something I used to talk about in the past, but it's come up again, as you'll see why. One of the Lowcock recommendations, which is recommendation number 6, states this, straight quote: "The Council should consider whether it has the skills and capacity needed adequately to pursue its interests in managing the contract with Amy." So that's Sir Mark, having examined the evidence around the streets ahead. Question: has SCC undergone this consideration as recommended by Sir Mark? And if so, what conclusion has been drawn? Has any such consideration taken into account the continued prevalence of potholes and depressed utility chambers, and the fact that some roads remain to be resurfaced 11 years into the contract? B, if SCC now believes it is competently managing Amy, 25-year contract, what additional measures have been implemented since the earlier reported failings? Shall I stop there, Tom?
Please do, that's great. I'll answer that because we're going on to different themes shortly. So there's a comprehensive delivery plan in place in response to the Lowcock inquiry. We've carried out an internal review of our resources and those within the Sheffield Street Tree Partnership to ensure that, yes, we've got the capacity and the skills needed to manage the Streets Ahead contract, and that funding for those resources will be factored into the budget setting process. That includes setting out the safe level of management for a contract of this size. We work very closely with central government to review this and also use support from peer authorities who run similar projects. And to give you some examples of how capability is being built, we have split the role of Head of Highways and Waste to create a dedicated Assistant Director of Highways post, created 2 service manager posts, and increased the number of technical officers and the number of inspectors. We've also recruited a business manager who provides some of their time to support the Sheffield Street Tree Partnership. That's on a 1-year trial basis, and we're funding a new dedicated partnership manager to work wholly with the Street Tree Partnership. We're carrying out an external health check to include consideration of how the council can further build up its own capacity, as well as set up flexible arrangements to enable us to have access to experts, and particularly for specialist legal, technical, financial and commercial resource. The Infrastructure and Projects Authority have been engaged to carry out an operational health check of the contract, which includes a full review of our contract delivery. The Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee has looked at a recovery plan for some of the failings in performance that we've seen in the past, and Amy are well on the way to achieving that recovery plan. We will be working with them on an ongoing basis to manage the highway infrastructure. There's regular briefings on highways maintenance with Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee members. Regarding previous failings on resurfacing, we've publicly committed to have the designs completed for March on the remaining core investment programme streets, which were at the heart of the protests. We're on track to complete designs for March. Some consultations for the designs will be complete for March, and some will follow later. The process includes consulting the Street Tree Partnership first, and then proceeding to public consultation, and there's a further commitment to have all the works complete before March 2025. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom, for that pretty comprehensive answer. I'll just emphasise that I wasn't coming at this from the point of view of the Street Tree Partnership, which you've mentioned several times. I'm fairly sanguine now about the arrangements for managing the street trees. This is about the roads. I do have other concerns beyond trees.
Understood. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, thanks for that. The second theme is misleading the courts. I welcome that SCC has, we are told, apologised last month to the Lord Chancellor for their misleading of the courts during the dark period of the street tree scandal. A, why did it take so long to send the apology since Lowcock published in last March? B, notwithstanding the accepted need for courtesy, and I have received the message that the reason for the delay might be to allow the Lord Chancellor sufficient time, I accept that. When is it now expected that the full apology will be shared with the people, the citizens? And finally on this, does the apology cover both the judicial review and the injunction hearings where counsel, lawyers and or officers are alleged to have misled the court?
Thank you very much. The apology to the court, like all of the apologies that we've made since the Lockhart report was published last year, needed to be fully considered and properly made. And so to do so, that required consideration of the legal points that were raised in Sir Mark's report. As that inquiry was independent, we haven't seen the detail of that advice, so we needed our own consideration. The General Counsel wanted to read all of the judgments in all of the cases taken by the Council to be sure that the Council agreed with the inquiry view that the misleading document had no impact on the outcome of those cases. We intend to share the apology publicly on the 31st of January. The apology does cover both the judicial review and the injunction proceedings that were taken by the Council. It is important to state that the inquiry found no evidence that council lawyers or other individual officers misled the courts. That was covered in some detail by Sir Mark, and the findings were that, and I quote, whilst the council as an organisation collectively knew it to be false, the inquiry has seen no evidence that suggests that any of the individuals giving witness statements in either case believed the strategy to be false. Likewise, we have not seen evidence of recklessness in the case preparation or evidence that any individual lawyer knew the strategy was false. He further added, we have seen no evidence to indicate that individuals involved were aware of the errors brought into the case by this document and allowed them to pass. The fact that this cannot be attributed to an individual should not take away from the gravity of the court being misled by a document produced by the council, and that is what we have apologised for.
Thanks, Tom. It's not just about that fake document, but there are other issues as well. Sir Mark was a very wise man, is a very wise man, and his work was highly valued. But he is not the ultimate and absolute source of all truths. I've mentioned this point a number of times. The Council frequently hides behind Lowcock, which was a valuable exercise, but it does not tie up accountability loose ends. Thank you. And that leads nicely to my next question, which is about accountability. In the context of the recent shocking report on child sexual exploitation in Lancashire, the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, stated that, in his view, all public servants, including those who have retired or relocated, should have a legal duty of candour and he finds refusal to give evidence to a voluntary inquiry, such as LOCOG's, to be unacceptable. You'll no doubt be aware of parallels here with the post office scandal, which obviously is on a much larger scale, but some of the issues are the same. A, does Councillor Hunt agree with his Labour colleague in Manchester on these general points, that there should be a legal duty of candour? I do realise there isn't one. And B, if he does, what steps will he take to remedy the remaining accountability shortcomings following the voluntary and flawed Locock inquiry? C, does he share the widely held view that it is shocking that two key implicated elected members remain on this council, which is almost unbelievable after, despite the damning evidence of the lack of effective leadership exposed by Sir Mark? D, does Councillor Hunt agree with me that if a council employed a social worker or a teacher who were guilty of serious misconduct, their professional bodies and any current employer must and would be informed? E, if so, why have the former members of the SCC legal team who misled the courts apparently been immune from any consequences whatsoever?
Thank you. First, I think it is important to state that I don't accept the premise of the question, which is that the Locock inquiry was flawed and that there have been accountability failings. We may have to agree to disagree on that broader point. On the Locock inquiry, the council invested over £800,000 into a year-long inquiry which had full access to vast amounts of council and AME documentation, including lots of digitally recovered material. Sir Mark Locock headed it up, a wise man, as you said, who delivered a detailed, comprehensive and impactful report. In that report, he made it clear that he'd spoken to over 150 people, and the vast majority of those approached engaged with the inquiry willingly. There is no evidence to suggest that the inquiry had missed any areas which would have been revealed had it had the power to compel attendance at public hearings. As you and I have discussed before, neither the monitoring officer nor the council as a whole body has the power to compel an elected member to resign their seat. Elected members are held accountable at the ballot box. The council does, of course, take misconduct seriously and follows proper safeguarding procedures. I think it is also worth saying and to remind everybody that the Locock inquiry found that, and I quote, "We have not seen evidence of recklessness in the case preparation or evidence that an individual lawyer knew that the strategy was false." Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Nearly that. Okay, different theme. This is a question about whether this city, and which I love, I've been here over 40 years now, I'm almost a Sheffielder, whether this city is punching at, above or below the weight, as it were, that we should be. Councillor Hunt, you may have seen the very recent Now Then piece, which unfavourably compares the ambition of Sheffield with 6 other councils, all on different grounds. This I found very disappointing because I want to have pride in this city. These grounds include, amongst others, climate action, landlord licensing, social housing on council-owned land, and Mr. Burnham's Housing First. There are others, but it wouldn't be appropriate to go into detail here. Most of you, I'm sure, would have read the Now Then piece. A, what is Councillor Hunt's take on the article? Or if you haven't read it, the suggestion that SCC's ambition or performance is, or has been, somewhat disappointing. And finally, if he broadly agrees that my city has had a recent history of gross underperformance, is he confident of the bright new dawn under the regime he now leads? Would, in his view, any of the initiatives cited in the article be appropriate to consider for Sheffield?
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. I love this city as well, and I've had the honour of being leader of the council since May 2023, and I know that the love for Sheffield is shared by all members in this chamber. I'm proud that we're setting forward a more ambitious vision for our city, looking up and outwards, acting and thinking like a big city in a way that I think, as a resident, I haven't always felt that the Sheffield as a city has in previous years. It's undeniable that there's been challenges that we faced as a council and as a city over recent years, but I am genuinely optimistic that we have a better and brighter future to look forward to. I'm grateful to now then for drawing attention to some really fantastic work that's being pioneered by Labour councils across the country, and I'm keen to learn from experiences of others and draw on best practice. So I think it's a helpful contribution about how we can think about innovative projects to improve people's lives here in Sheffield. What I would say, though, is at the last Strategy and Resources Committee in December, we agreed a draft council plan, which very clearly raises the level of ambition for this council, encouraging us to look up and outwards, making it clear that we are now putting in place a triple lock for our decision making, so that when we consider what we're doing, when we consider how to make decisions, we're asking ourselves the question, is it good for the people of Sheffield and does it involve them? Is it good for safeguarding the future of our planet? And is it good for the prosperity of our city? Now, I think that within there were some big, ambitious things that it's right to just take a moment to highlight. Extending the tram train 35 years ago, foresighted politicians took a big decision to introduce a tram system in our city. It's right that we now are looking at how we improve public transport in our city, creating new, sustainable, livable neighbourhoods at Neepsend, Ascliffe, Waterside, transforming our city centre. This year, in the next few months, we're going to see the Heart of the City regeneration scheme open up new shops, bars, cafes, hotel, new great public spaces, and that's been council-led. Transforming the cultural offer through a credible vision for Grace Gallery and Central Library, as we were just talking about. So there are big long-term things that we are working on and taking decisions on to make sure that this city has a better and brighter future. So it's time that Sheffield punched above its weight, and I think on this one, we're very much on the same page. Thank you very much for your questions today.
Thank you. I was, for once, quite impressed by that answer, Tom. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much. Could I ask Isabel O'Leary to come up? Sorry, lost for words for a moment.
Left hand. Okay, thank you. So my question's about the tree campaign plaque, but it's broader than that. I'd like to thank you, the council, for listening to campaigners and rethinking the deadline and the process for commissioning the plaque to be installed in the entrance of the town hall, alongside the Kinder Scout mass trespass plaque. The provision of the tree campaign plaque was agreed in the resolution passed at the extraordinary general meeting last May, and the wording in that resolution was that it's to be in recognition of those who fought for our environmental heritage and were vindicated, and to serve as a reminder to all elected members that this failure of leadership will never happen again. So this is not just a bit of metal on a wall, it's highly symbolic. The tree campaign has been inspirational for many campaigners within Sheffield and beyond. It's given people hope that community groups can achieve positive change, both for the environment and more broadly, including how things are run in local authorities. The plaque will be a lasting reminder of that hope, in the same way that the Kinder Trespass plaque recognises the broader outcomes of that campaign for access to nature. So the representation of these ideas in a plaque obviously needs to be carefully conceived, and the process of commissioning the plaque needs to demonstrate that the culture and practices of Sheffield City Council are changing, as I believe they are. The principle of co-production and co-ownership, as described in the city goals, is a good one, but has not been followed so far in this process, because for the benefit of those who don't know, so far the process for producing the plaque has been for an officer to produce an image of some people sitting or standing under a tree, some of them with their arms in the air. And this was presented to representatives from Stag and the Street Tree Partnership, who, by the way, thought they were not allowed to share those more widely. They were convinced. it was shared for their approval. When they didn't approve the design, they were asked to produce an alternative design with a short timescale over Christmas, which would then be put out for public consultation by an unspecified method. I'd suggest this is not co-production or co-working. At present, the task of driving the plaque project has been given to an officer, but this may not be the best plan, as I believe it needs political oversight from someone who understands the symbolic importance of the project. Will Councillor Hunt agree that overall leadership should therefore come perhaps from himself to demonstrate learning from Sir Mark Lowcock's finding that the responsibility for the serious and sustained failure of strategic leadership previously ultimately rests with the political leadership? I understand that co-production and co-working is obviously difficult in practice if it's not clear who are the relevant parties. And as an update, I've been involved in discussions with campaigners both within and outside Stag, and a consensus does seem to be emerging that the way forward could be to set up a time-limited partnership group between campaigners and the council for the purpose of establishing firstly a clear brief for what the plaque is about, and then to commission and procure the plaque. The small group of campaigners involved would need to be those with a particular interest in getting the plaque right, and once you've got great credibility with tree campaigners generally, and include expertise in commissioning public art, so as to guide the council. And I believe that with political oversight from the deputy leader or the leader, and an officer with an understanding of procuring public art, we could get a good outcome. Would this committee agree that this would fit with the council's new model of working in partnership with community groups?
Thanks very much. Well, I'm pleased to say that the Sheffield Street Tree Partnership have offered to facilitate wider discussions to find an appropriate method of commemorating the campaign. The council, along with other organisations, is a key partner in the Street Tree Partnership, and so we'll be involved, but we recognise that there's value in trying a different approach. The partnership will organise opportunities to discuss what people feel would be the best way to commemorate the campaign, and then how best to go about commissioning the work. And that's going to be discussed at the next meeting of the partnership on the 30th of January, with the formal process beginning in February. This will lead to a delay in the previously envisaged timescales in response to this our part of the response to the Lowcock report, but it's right to try a different approach on this one in order to get it right. And I do think that as leader of the council, I should show leadership to demonstrate learning from Sir Mark's inquiry, and indeed, that's what I've been trying to do over the last few months since I became leader in May. One of the things I think we can demonstrate learning on is that this is not the council doing things to the people of Sheffield, but with the people of Sheffield. And I think facilitating the discussions around the best way to commemorate the campaign through the Street Tree Partnership is a kind of demonstrable step in showing that commitment to not doing things to, but with. But that learning isn't just about me or one person. It's whole council, cross-party, and all member, to make sure that we are all involved in implementing the findings of Sir Mark's report and learning the lessons from it. So hopefully that gives you an answer to your question. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for your patience during the break as well. We have no member questions that have been submitted today. Item number 7 is a report detailing members of staff who are retiring from the council. And so on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank everybody named in the report for their many years of service to the council, and we wish everybody a very happy and long retirement. Thank you very much. Item number 8 is the work programme, and here I will hand over to Craig Rogerson from Democratic Services to just give us an update on the work programme.
Thank you, Chair. Members have got the latest version of the work programme in their agenda pack. That's at page 43. There are a number of new items since the last time we met in December, set out on page 48. I want to draw members' attention to two specific parts of the report. First is the two items on page 48 that we're recommending that we give to Finance Committee for decision, and that's on advertising and sponsorship policy and long-term empty and second homes premium. And the second part of the report is just on page 44 and 45. There are two references from December Council that are set out there and recommended actions to be taken in response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Craig. Any questions or any points people want to pick up about the work programme? No? Okay. We're all happy to agree the work programme going forward then. Thank you very much. Right, the first of our formal decisions today relates to the next agenda item, which is the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan for the year 2024-25. And we're being joined by Janet Sharp to present the report. Janet, thank you for joining us. Just for the benefit of people who may be watching at home, if you can just introduce yourself and then introduce the report. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Janet Sharp and I'm the Director of Housing in the Neighbourhoods Directorate. So what I want to present here today is the annual report regarding the Housing Revenue Account and the business plan for 24-25. This is a report, obviously, that reviews the HRA business plan, which is a ring-fenced account that is responsible for managing and maintaining and investing in our council homes, and also funds all of our services for our council tenancies. The report also sets out the budgets for the year ahead. It also sets out a 5-year plan in terms of revenue and capital expenditure and those budgets for managing and maintaining its stock, and also a 30-year profile to ensure that what we do have is a 30-year viable HRA business plan that can obviously support council housing into the future. The purpose of this report coming to Strategy and Resources Politica is to recognise the considerable amount of work that's taken place with the Housing Policy Committee and also with our tenants and residents living in homes, and also sets out both the pressures and also the priorities for the HRA business plan for 24-25 over the 5-year programme, and also the work that needs to take place to make sure we deliver on those strategies. As I hope the report is fairly self-explanatory and details, obviously, it sets a national and local context. One of the things that the report also sets out this year is the significant and more stringent regulation of housing in the country. And obviously, one of the things that has been taking place, is a considerable amount of work to make sure we're not only regulatory compliant, but also how we improve our services for our tenants, how we make sure homes are safe, are well managed and maintained, and also that also influences the investment priorities and also how we manage our tenancies into the future. The report also sets out the significant challenges within the Housing Revenue Account. As you will recall, that the rents are set in line with the rent standard, which obviously is a national position, but also the increasing costs that we are facing in terms of making sure our homes, many of which obviously need a considerable amount of investment, and you can see that obviously from the priorities in terms of increasing both in our repairs budgets and our long-term capital investment, and also takes into account obviously homes that we are losing and the huge pressures on housing. So costs are significantly increasing for the housing revenue account. And Sheffield is not alone on some of those pressures. That is a national issue. So it is really important that my recommendations today is that we set rents in line with the rent standard, and in that way that we can manage within the budget set out in the report, but also recognise the additional support that is taking place with tenants. Many who may be facing significant hardship in the city, and all the interventions that we can put in place to ensure that people are able to afford. The report also sets out not just the rents for homes, but rents for our garage sites, sheltered housing, other service charges that are provided. And also I would want to make one amendment to the report, which is that when we talk about increasing council homes rents by 7.7%, as set out in 2.16 of the report, that also includes increasing by the same amount our temporary accommodation homes, so that they will increase by 7.7%. And I'd like to add that to the recommendations in the report. In 2.6 of the report sets out pressures facing, obviously, the housing revenue account in 24-25, and also how we will attempt to mitigate those pressures, and obviously making sure that our income and our expenditure balance in that financial year. And also sets out the risks and the long-term direction of that, which is to make sure that one of the things that we are doing is we'll be bringing forward to the Housing Policy Committee a robust asset management strategy for our council homes moving forward, and also to ensure that, you know, we can and how we will invest in homes moving forward to make sure we can meet the unprecedented demand for council housing that we are now facing in the city. And also, on a positive note, also sets out, you know, the huge amount of work that's taking place with our registered providers, who provided many homes in the city and want to do more to increase the levels of social housing in the city. And also sets out, you know, the consultation and the priorities that our tenants themselves in Appendix A have set out, that those are the things that's really important to them in terms of how we improve not only homes, how we deliver our tenant services, but how we work with other services, and also how we make sure our neighbourhoods are well managed and maintained as well. And that includes a detail. And then on the appendix to the report, that sets out the overall plan for the business plan. We consult with tenants not just once a year as part of the review, but it's an ongoing process of dialogue with tenants to make sure we're delivering our services in a way that they would like to see them delivered. We recognise that we need to make significant improvements in the way we deliver services, but also recognises, you know, that how we deliver services and also how we engage with our tenants is incredibly important. So I didn't really want to go through any further detail, and also for consideration of the recommendations as part of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Janet. So I've seen Councillor Johnson who wants to come in as Chair of the Housing Policy Committee. Can I just see if other members want to come in? Councillor Naz. Councillor Johnson.
Well, thank you. I just want to say to you as Chair of the Housing Committee, first of all, to acknowledge the huge amount of work that goes into producing this multi-million-pound budget, and to thank the Director of Housing and all the team for all the work that has gone in there. It's a very significant budget, and you know it far dwarfs many councils around the rest of the country. It just reflects the fact that this is an enormous public service that this council provides to the people of Sheffield, and there's a lot of people involved with that. So just want to sort of put that on the record. He's something we should still be proud of, despite all the the difficulties of arranging something in an organisation of this size. Just want to say thanks to all the staff in the housing neighbourhoods and in our repairs and maintenance teams for all the work they do day in, day out to make these tenants, make these homes the real places that our tenants live in. And, you know, to acknowledge that we all know that, you know, not everything is perfect in the field of housing, but actually we have a lot of people who are doing the best and do the best jobs they can. And finally, I also want to thank our tenants who live in our homes, are part of, you know, the council as an organisation in that sense, and who pay for all this. And, you know, the challenge in this is about maintaining as much resource as possible to put into services to tenants for their homes against the challenge of the entire state of the funding of public housing in this entire country. So there's a lot of people doing a good job there, and I just want to put, you know, my comments on record as chair of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Naz and then Councillor Hurst, and then I've got Councillor Belbin. Okay, I'll take two more rounds. So we'll go Councillor Naz, Councillor Hurst. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Janet, for the presentation. Page 65, undeliverable BIPs for reduction in disrepair claims. Page 66, undeliverable BIPs to reduce cost in repairs and maintenance service. Again on page 66, undeliverable BIP in community buildings. Who do you report these to? I'm just trying to understand, where does this go? So does this go to the Housing Policy Committee, or are you reporting this to the BIP group? From my point of view, it's not good enough. It'll be really good to have an early conversation in regards to next year's budget to discuss this in more detail. Would you be happy to come to a finance meeting to discuss this with members of Finance Committee? Because in terms of undeliverable BIPs, it just means that there's less money to spend capital. And I was reading the consultation, things that are really important to residents. We are unable to deliver on them, so it'll be really good to understand where this discussion is taking place, where you're reporting to, and if you would be happy to come and speak to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hurst.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for this report, Janet. I do very much appreciate your commitment to working with tenants and increasing consultation and increasing their involvement in the future of delivery of the housing strategy, because it's tremendously important at the moment. We have a climate emergency, we have a cost of living crisis, and we have some very difficult conditions for people living in this city to overcome. And like Councillor Naz, I picked up on some of the undelivered bits and some of the budget pressures, and I can understand the reason for those. But this seems to be quite a treading water plan, rather than one that delivers with an ambition. And I wondered if there was anything that you would have liked to have included in here that you didn't get the chance to, and what that might be, to give a feel for what might be coming in the future.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hurst. Come back to Janet, and then three more members have indicated, so I'll do one more round after that. Janet.
Yes, certainly. So in terms of the numbers of disrepairs, obviously we receive a significant number, obviously, of disrepair cases that come through, and they can be for many reasons. You know, obviously people are not happy with the condition of homes, or the homes, you know, haven't been addressed. Often as well, one of the things that we see is you know, many sort of companies who obviously target tenants to obviously go down that route rather than the normal route, which is obviously to report a repair and give us the opportunity to deliver that repair. The disrepairs has been a significant priority for the Housing Policy Committee, and we presented a resolution to how we might deal with the increasing numbers of disrepair cases. and put together a clear action plan for addressing that. Not only to make sure, obviously, our homes are safe, are fit, are well maintained, but also out of the money that we are spending on disrepairs, the vast majority is not going to tenants. And so what we have done is put a more of a bespoke solution to tenants, and often find tenants, sometimes, are struggling once they're in a disrepair process to be able to manage that process, so that we also spend a lot of time working with tenants to support them through in that process. One of the things we've also done is we've reviewed our process, and also we presented to committee additional resources through Tom Smith's team, who manages obviously the Housing Repair Service, of how we can not only address the disrepair cases, but also how we can put additional resource in to deliver, obviously, categories of repairs that we probably needed to have more resources to be able to deliver those improvements, and also so that we could see over a 2-year period that the numbers of disrepairs would either stabilise or would start to reduce. And obviously, one of the things we do want to do is invest in our repair service and through our capital programme to improve the quality of homes. And if we get that right, then obviously what we will see is a reduction in disrepair cases coming forward, and our ability obviously to respond to disrepair cases will improve. Happy to come to the Finance Committee. This is a key area of scrutiny for the Housing Policy Committee, and has been so over the last 12 months. More than happy to come to the Finance Committee to set out clearly what is in the plan to address disrepair, and Sheffield is not alone in this particular issue in the city that we're presently facing. Thank you. And then in terms of the okay with that. So in terms of the tenants, is one of the things in terms of the tenants, regular engagement tenants is absolutely critical. One of the things that we have for 24-25 is there is considerable increase in new legislation for housing as a sector. We have many priorities, many new areas of legislation, increased regulation, but also we want to spend the year to do a root and branch review of what a sustainable investment programme is for our council housing stock, with a new asset management strategy, and also we do 100% stock condition surveys, so we understand the condition of our homes, and we make sure that the long-term 30-year investment plan for our stock is robust, and that piece of work will take place during 24-25 and early in 25-26 to make sure that we have a viable business plan. What we've also in the report is looking at, both the increase in regulation and also the significant pressures that we are facing in housing. Rents have been less than ideal, obviously, in previous years, and that means that we have been bearing through the HRA business plan, significant, hits on income and availability, while at the same time our costs are increasing. Inflation is increasing, construction prices are increasing. So it is a business plan that recognises that we have to live within our means. We have to make sure we're delivering good services for our tenants and improving our homes, but also that we can make sure not only in year, but over the 30 years we have a viable business plan moving forward. And I also think within the report, it probably, around some of the other work that we also take place, doing huge amounts of work where we're bringing forward obviously a new housing strategy, aligning that obviously with the council's council plan, our city goals and our values, but also the significant changes we will be making the way we are engaging with tenants to make sure their voice is heard as well in our communities, whilst also addressing some of the significant risks that we also find. And we're still losing, up to 300 homes a year through the Right to Buy policy. So there is a lot of national policy changes that is affecting the business plan. So for 24-25, one of the things that I'm recommending is that we do a proper review of the business plan, and also we make sure we've got those clear plans for investing in homes as well, investing in services right, and also, you know, how we mitigate some of the financial risk for the business plan that will obviously make sure we can be confident that we have all the plans in place for a viable 30-year business plan for our council homes.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got 4 members who've indicated they want to speak, so I'm going to take those 4 and then come back. And if people could keep questions and answers as brief as possible, that would be ideal. Councillor Belbin, Councillor Williams, Councillor Smith and Councillor Baker in that order.
Thank you. I do share Councillor Hurst's frustration really at the lack of ambition within the paper. I think I do recognise all the pressures that there are on the HRA, absolutely, and particularly the regulatory environment. I know there's been a lot of that going on this year. And I know partly because I'm a substitute on the Housing Committee, so I do get the papers through, but I have found it frustrating how much the Housing Policy Committee has focused on that regulatory environment, perhaps, and which I do, obviously we have to do that, but that seems to be fairly straightforward things that we absolutely have to do, and less on looking for perhaps some more innovative solutions around how we address some of the massive challenges we have in around our housing. I think, you know, what we're seeing is treading water is a good way of putting it. We're just seeing a lack of progress, and it feels like it's been like that for the last couple of years, if I'm honest, on the Housing Committee. When you look at projects like Gleedless Valley, that is, you know, seems to be making no progress at all, and what we're hearing from people in that area is that there is an information vacuum. I find that quite concerning. And I think it's also quite telling that where we have started to make progress, when we are looking at housing growth and in increasing potentially the amount of affordable housing, it's when those issues have been taken away from the Housing Policy Committee and are actually now being looked at as part of a partnership board with Homes England, with the Mayor's Office, Sheffield Property Association and so on. So I think my question is perhaps not so much for you, Janet, but for yourself, Councillor Johnson, as chair of that committee. What can we do to drive forward some of these, some more progress in the area of housing? Because it just doesn't feel like we are achieving enough at the moment.
Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah. I noticed in the report that obviously we're increasing rent by 7.7%. My concern is that the government have recently announced that working age benefits are only going up by 6.7%. And in your report, you kind of tacitly acknowledge that rent arrears may well go up. Have you got any idea, or have you done any projections of what that might look like? And also, what would be the impact on your overall programme for the year?
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Janet. I'll start off with a positive. I was really pleased to see the commitment to increase the number of apprenticeships. So my committee's been reviewing the overall apprentice programme for the council, and yeah, increasing the number of apprenticeships will boost the city's skills bank. So that was really good. Pleased to see that. I've heard within the report and also in some of the questions we've had, members have been touching on regulatory compliance, and the report itself talks about gas, it talks about electrical, it talks about fire safety. So can you give us a bit more detail on the level of compliance that we have within our housing stock? And based on the information here, are we going to be compliant in the next financial year? Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I think I want to draw attention to the fact that the work that has been done within particularly the maintenance department over the last couple of years. The council brought the repair and maintenance in-house very quickly over a very short period of time with very little planning in advance. And the work to make this what I would class fit for purpose repairs and maintenance department has been going on ever since. It's not something that could be done overnight. It's had seen a lot of staff changes. It's seen a lot of problems in getting trades, because there is a lack of trades out there that we'll have noticed anywhere where anybody's trying to build or repair. I know I've waited 18 months for some repair work on my private home, and it impacts back on the trades that we have available within our housing stock. I think we're getting somewhere now. I feel that it's a better department than it was. I feel that some of the things we brought in over the last couple of years, including the text notifications for tenants and all the work that tenants have done to work with officers and councillors to improve the situation. And we mustn't forget that we have to consult at every stage with our tenants, and this is now written in law. They are very definite stakeholders. We are looking very strongly at bringing the properties into a much better place regarding climate change and net zero. Until we get something that will replace the gas boiler in a lot of our properties nationwide, never mind Sheffield, the best thing we can do is to insulate these properties to the highest level we can. We're working very hard on this. We've got over 30,000 level C and above, but there's still work to be done there, and we recognise that. I think this is a good example of where we are after a very difficult time, picking up a lot of pieces and putting something back together again. And I think I feel, as someone who's worked in housing for a while, that we're beginning to get there. We have some really good planned maintenance properties coming online that will stop a lot of the repeats on repairs, and as it can take up to 3 visits to sort out some of these repairs with 3 different trades. With the planned maintenance programme, this can be dealt with in one job lot, much more convenient for tenants than we have at the moment. And they're coming online now in different parts of the city, which will help there, and it will reduce the pressures on the repairs and maintenance department. We have a long way to go. We have a lot of work to go. We have a lot of regulation to bring on board. And yes, we have visions for the future. But these visions are for warm, safe, appropriate properties for our tenants. And we accept, I think, to a one, that we've got a lot of work to do. And we thank and support the officers who are coming along that journey with us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baker. Look, I think clearly the HRA business the business case represents is an illustration rather of the significant pressures that the account is under, which means that our ambition to make sure that we are driving up both the quality and the quantity of homes in this city, including the provision of new affordable homes, means we must look at other options for delivery and other partners to work with. And it's been noted the work that is referenced in the report about the Sheffield Together Partnership, working with Homes England, South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority and others to do this. And I think we will see significant progress through that set of partners over the coming year. And I think it's right that the HRA is somewhat reprofiled to focus on improving the quality of homes for our existing tenants and providing as high quality estate management and tenant services as we possibly can. Now, that isn't to overplay the significant challenges that there are, to underplay. Gleeds Valley has been mentioned. That is a significant challenge that we must get on top of in order to deliver on that master plan. So, Janet, I'll come back to you and then we'll wind this to a conclusion. Thank you.
Certainly. So one of the questions, obviously, that was raised, obviously, about the rental income. So one of the things that we are doing is obviously making sure that we get our rent in, and obviously we have, a good track record, obviously, of income collection. What we've also done as well is wrapped around some of our most vulnerable tenants who are struggling with their rents. So we not only have a hardship fund that helps and supports some of our vulnerable households, but I think through the cost of living work, that also looks at all of the help and support that is available to our residents across the city, whether that is council tax support, that is utility support, that is other housing support and other cost of living support and help that is available. We're able to triage support and help some of our tenants. And tenants and households who work with us, we are able also to make sure that we are not necessarily writing off their rents, because we do very, very little of that. But what we are doing is making sure that we can manage any arrears payments effectively and at a level that our tenants can support. That has paid dividends, and you will see in the report that we have also increased in additional CAB resources and also debt management support, and that has been very fruitful. In the appendix, it sets out obviously the income. The income will increase over the time, and that is absolutely critical to be able to deliver the services. But we also spend a lot of time to identify people who may be struggling. And actually, rather than waiting for a crisis to happen, we intervene as early as possible, and that's a message that we get out there very strong, that tenants come forward at the earliest possible stage. In terms of compliance that was raised, so we self-referred to the regulator on one compliance area, on our gas compliance. Huge amounts of work has taken place by both repair service and the housing service to ensure we can enter properties actually to do those gas checks, and that work has significantly improved our performance, and we've worked very much in the early part of 24-25 to be fully compliant in that area. We've also regular report on all of the consumer standards and the compliance areas, and AGMAN chairs housing and repairs improvement board, and that is critical in terms of making sure we're on track. We know what our compliance standards are, we know where we are, and also early in 24-25 we're also obviously bringing third parties in to also check to make sure we are on track, and also actually do a deep dive and to make sure if there are any areas for improvements or gaps that we address them as part of the operations. So in terms of, some of the words not being, could be more, is one of the things that I think we need to recognise is that, unlike many cities, we have still set out a very significant investment programme for our homes, over 700 million over the next 5 years. And also in the report, it also sets out, the huge amounts of work that's taking place and our journey into not only making sure all our homes are EPCC by 2030, but we also have been presented to the Housing Policy Committee later this week our climate statement that sets out priorities for housing, where the Housing Policy Committee have worked really hard in terms of future ambition, but also recognition our roadmap to net zero and what that looks like, that will be discussed at that policy committee, and I know that that is a priority. The warmer we can keep our homes, the better they will be and more insulated, and also that will reduce household bills, and that is a priority for, obviously, for us not only to improve the warmth of our homes, but also to make sure our tenants are able to afford to put the heating on and be able to have a quality life living in council housing.
Thank you very much indeed. So we've got a number of...
Chair, can I come back here just to make a brief point to answer the questions? I'll try and keep it brief, but just as it was raised about the political leadership from here of the housing service. probably ought to respond to that, and just reflect on the fact that actually the governance of the Housing Service and the Housing Committee has been developing over the course of the year. And I made a bit of a flip and quick before about too many Labour councillors on the committee. But of course, the serious point is to reflect that it is actually a cross-party committee. We do have an approach of working together, and I'm in the unusual position of a chair of being very much in a minority on the committee there. But because we've got all parties involved there, it has led to quite an important step towards turning around the governance. Councillor Smith quite rightly said there's been quite a lot of discussion on the regulation, and I think it is important to recognise that for housing professionals, they're actually moving into an area of increasing professionalisation, which has never happened before. It's new everywhere in the country. It's not just Sheffield, but where social workers, teachers, etc., have had a regime of professional inspection, qualification, registration for a long time. That's not happened in housing. So this is a fundamental shift to the way that social housing is regulated and will be run. And I think that's really welcome, but it certainly is a challenge there. The Housing Committee collectively is trying to oversee that. And, it is fair to say that certainly some members of the Housing Committee worked pretty hard on, doing things like, so we had a really useful deep dive into the damp and mould issue. It's a really important topical, but actually a really important issue for everyone's well-being who lives in that housing. So it is important for members to be on top of that. So I just want to sort of reflect that and just reflect how much cross-party effort there is and how much scope there is for members to be involved in that if they want to. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. I think that all of us who are elected to represent the people of Sheffield and have the privilege of serving in positions of leadership, whether we're in a minority or whatever size of our group, frankly, have a responsibility to do everything we can to improve services and make sure that we're doing all we can to improve lives of people in Sheffield. So I think, I note those comments, but I think it's on all of us as leaders of our parties and leaders of committees to do everything we can to improve services. We have a number of recommendations that are ahead of us, including the slightly amended recommendation that Janet mentioned at the beginning. So there's broadly that they're listed A to I, and I will take them as a package. People happy to recommend to the meeting of the City Council on 7th of February that we adopt the HRO business plan as set out in the appendix, and the forthcoming recommendations from there. Are people happy with the set of recommendations?
Consent.
Okay. Councillor Hurst, noted. Everyone else's approval, noted. Thank you. Thank you, Jan. Okay, thank you. And just for the record, we paused for 15 minutes earlier on, so we'll adjust the timings accordingly. But we've got 3 open agenda items and then 1 closed agenda item to follow. So item number 10. Colleagues will remember that just over a year ago, full council unanimously passed a motion which was entitled Adopting the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims' Definition of Islamophobia. And the motion set out the APPG definition that Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. It asked SNR, this committee, to consider that definition of Islamophobia and the supporting guidelines and to consider incorporating that into our ongoing work into the Race Equality Commission. We considered our ongoing work to implement the recommendations of the Race Equality Commission last month and also considered our draft equality framework. And so today's decision before us is to consider formally adopting the definition. And before we hear from James, I'd just like to pay particular tribute to Councillor Abdul Qayyum, who proposed the motion at full council, and to Councillor Abdusam Mohammed, who seconded the motion when it came to full council. So, James, I'll hand over to you. Perhaps you could just introduce yourself and then introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm James Henderson, Director of Policy and Democratic Engagement. So, as Councillor Hunt has said, the report that the committee is considering today responds to the motion that was passed by full council, which asked this committee to adopt on behalf of the City Council the All-Party Parliamentary Group on British Muslims definition of Islamophobia, its associated guidance statement, and to take steps to put in place actions that will implement that definition. And as Councillor Hunt has said, this is a key part and is aligned to the work that the committee considered at its last meeting about becoming an anti-racist city and organisation, and the equality framework which sets out our equality objectives for the forthcoming 4 years. So the report in front of you sets out the definition, which Councillor Hunt has just read out, and the rationale for adopting it, recognising that the Equality Act 2010 provides protection for both religion and faith and race, but does not specify in detail different types of racism or anti-religious hate, and therefore a more detailed definition of Islamophobia is helpful. The report notes that there is broad support for adopting the definition and that other councils have done so, and the report recommends that Sheffield City Council follows suit. However, it is important that the Strategy and Resources Committee are aware that some groups have criticised the definition because of fears that it could impinge on the free speech rights of others, and in particular that it could be interpreted to conflate criticism of Islam as religion with racism or anti-religious hatred. As such, the report notes the human rights considerations that the committee should be mindful of when considering this item, including the freedom of religion and the freedom of expression in considering this issue. And in particular, the report recommends that the term anti-Muslim hatred should be preferred in any context where there is any potential for uncertainty in the intended impact, and that in adopting the definition, it will not be interpreted in such a way as to impinge on the free speech rights of any person. To be clear, though, that in so doing, this is not intended to enable or give a green light to illegitimate criticism of Islam, including particularly hate speech against Muslims, and is intended indeed to have entirely the opposite effect. The report also recommends that as part of the ongoing work on developing the action plans associated with the equality framework, which will be considered at the March meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee, that as part of that we'll identify the key actions that we will look to take as an organisation in support of recognising and eliminating Islamophobia in the city, including the specific issues that were identified in the original motion that was considered by full council. I'll pause there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any people who would like to speak on this? I saw Councillor Otten first, so I'll come to you. Councillor Otten.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I welcome this proposal. I should say, many years ago, I would have been a member of the National Secretary Society on and off, back when I cared rather too much about what other people might believe. I honestly don't see what they're getting at in their criticism of this. I think it's quite clear. If you go through the guidance, it's quite clear that we should be treating people respectfully, and we can have civilised discussions about what may or may not be true. I mean, it seems utterly straightforward. So I completely welcome this proposal. I think the clarification around free speech is useful. I'm not entirely sure it's necessary, but let's have it because it's useful. So, yeah, completely welcome this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson, I saw.
Thanks, yeah. There's 2 points I'd just like to ask about here. I mean, first of all, yeah, I mean, I think broadly it's welcome. I mean, something that we all voted for in full council, and just the proposers. And it's obviously a really important thing for us to take a stance this that's in line with the Race Equality Commission, etc. You know, it is important that we actually do share some leadership on this. So 2 things. One is just on the free speech, and what my concern is that what we're trying to do here is address, you know, a strong statement on anti-Muslim hate, but balance up with recognising that, you know, we're in that very complex area of, you know, international human rights law around freedom of expression, as well as, you know, right to belief and right not to have a belief. What I'm slightly concerned about is that if we go ahead with this recommendation that very clearly states the definition does not and will not be interpreted in such a way as to impinge on free speech rights of any person. What I don't want to be in a situation where you get someone shouting abuse at a Muslim woman at the front of the bus, and they can point to this and said, we will not under any circumstances interfere with free speech. And I think what we're getting at here is that we recognise that some free speech is protected to a qualified extent in international law, and some isn't. And I think what I propose by way of an amendment, if this goes ahead, is simply the word protected in there. So we refer to in such a way as to impinge on protected free speech rights. Because that recognises that actually we are talking about an element of the legal framework there. So I wanted to flag that up. I see that you're indicating that that's obviously being considered, James, so that's very welcome. But that's my concern. I just wanted to flag that up before we go ahead. The second thing is possibly linked with this. It's not been flagged up first. And I noticed that we're saying there hasn't been any consultation on this. Not even with other faith leaders in the city. And I wondered whether that was the right position for us to be in now. It does seem a little bit strange. Certainly as the equality impact assessment flags up some of the concerns, some of the opposition to this particular definition, flags that other faith leaders might have a view on it. And I just wonder where we are. What is the rationale about thinking we shouldn't consult even with those faith leaders? Should we in fact be reconsidering that before we bring this back for approval? So I just want to raise those two things.
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Can I see if anyone else wants to come in? Okay, Councillor Naz, and then I'll come back. And maybe there may be a view from David, possibly on Councillor Johnson's point. And Councillor Naz.
Thank you, James. I also welcome these proposals, but I'm also concerned about paragraph 2.8, the reference to criticism of Islamic doctrine. Could you define this, please? What does this actually mean? For example, my friend and colleague Abtisam Mohammed also seconded this motion, has spoken about her lived experience wearing a hijab at full council, and she's talked about offensive remarks and physical abuse towards her and her family for wearing the hijab. Who within the council would determine whether this is Islamic doctrine or Islamophobia? Surely we cannot be judge and jury in this situation. So I don't know, I'm just a bit concerned about that word in particular. Also, as a Muslim woman, I've been disheartened to learn that this year South Yorkshire Police were unable to provide data on Islamophobia offences, hate crime, which I must say is really poor. How will we ensure that we hold partners to account and build trust in our communities? And lastly, I'd just like to make reference to paragraph 1.3, collaborating with local Muslim community to challenge Islamophobia. As the chair of Stand Up to Racism, myself and Angela and Gencio were invited to an Islamophobia awareness event at the Israq Centre in Broome Hall, which was funded by the Central LAC. And it was really, really powerful to listen to lived experience and stories of local Muslim women. What efforts will the council make to reach out to its Muslim communities? And as part of this group that myself and Councillor Gencio attended, we are setting up a peer group for Muslim women to be able to support each other, because what we found is a lot of the Muslim women are not reporting this, and we really need to encourage people to, particularly women, to report Islamophobia, hate crime to the police, so we need to help do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. Yeah, I'll come to James, and then David is going to come in as well. On the consultation point, I think, you know, if this decision is taken today, we're saying that this now would be supporting the Council's Equality Framework, which is out for consultation and would be brought back in March. So there is consultation around our Equalities Framework going on at the moment, and so I think that's just a point worth making. But James, I know you want to come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. If I just start with Councillor Johnson's questions. So in terms of the protected free speech point, if I can draw your attention to the section on human rights implications in the report, and particularly 5.4.2, and the section on freedom of expression. And it says at the bottom of that paragraph that the adoption of the APPG definition is not intended to and will not be interpreted in such a way as to conflict with the Article 10 rights of any person beyond the existing legal restrictions, e.g. on hate speech, that are in place. And in particular, it will not be interpreted in such a way as to have any impact on protected political free speech. So I hope that responds to the points that you were making. So I think that one is there. I think Councillor Hunt has answered the question on consultation, which is what I was going to say as well, that we will pick this up as part of, and are picking this up as part of the work that we're already well on with in terms of the equality framework and equality objectives, and we will bring that back to this committee in March. If I can move on to Councillor Naz's questions. So the first was around the definition of criticism of Islamic doctrine. I think actually it's more helpful to talk about illegitimate criticism of Islamic doctrine, and indeed that's what this this definition is intending to ensure doesn't happen. That we are clear that criticism, for example, of women wearing hijab is not something that this is going to enable. What that means is, for example, this is a national example, but somebody like Richard Dawkins, who's written a number of books criticising organised religion in the round, that would be the sort of criticism of religion that we would wish to permit, but it is not about anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic hatred or speech that criticises people for holding those beliefs. So hopefully that just explains a little bit what we mean. But I wonder if it would be helpful for the committee if we were able to produce a bit of a guidance note that sets this out in a little bit more detail, and that'd be something I would be happy to take away and put in place if that would be useful.
Thank you. That's a very kind offer, and I think there's nods around the table when you're saying that, so I think we'll take that forward. I know, Councillor Johnson, you want to come back in. I just want to give David the chance to comment on this, given that we've sort of strayed into the legal world.
Yeah, I think it's just really to confirm what Councillor Johnson said, actually. I think the report referred to those rights, so I think those rights only apply when they are protected. So it's not about giving a free platform to anybody to do anything, and actually it's not about giving anybody a platform at all. So having those rights doesn't mean you necessarily have a platform to be able to say those things within the council premises. So, and it's not extending to giving anybody that platform. What I would also say is that, in response to Councillor Naz, that again, those protected rights don't extend to anything that is a criminal offence or a hate crime or anything, so those types of things will be picked up. But also, the council has its own policies and procedures and codes of conduct, and the types of things that Councillor Naz says is what I don't think would be protected, but our own policies would pick those up as well. So this wouldn't be overriding those policies in any way whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. We'll just come to Councillor Johnson first, and then I'll see Councillor Austin, and then we'll, I think, be able to come to a conclusion on this. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, well, good. Well, thanks, David, for saying that, because that saves me having to make that point. I read the paragraph there attached to the bit on the Articles 9 and Article 10, but I think the point is just to get that reflected in the recommendation, because ultimately the recommendation is going to be appearance of minutes, and no one's going to go looking for the report that kind of qualifies that in that significant way. So it's just suggesting we just insert that word protected into the recommendation. I think that works, and I'm going to look, because if anyone kicks me onto the tables, if that doesn't work in some way. So that's my first point. And then the second one, just on the consultation. So the point, I think, is that I noted that we are consulting on the equality framework, but I think it's a very different nature of consultation, as in that's a more general consultation. It's on our approach to equality, not the specifics, and this is a specific item. And I probably wouldn't propose a wide-scale public consultation, but I would have thought we do need to speak to the specific faith leaders in the city. And partly I just want to give credit to the fact that senior officers have done a lot of work to build good relations on establishing some really important links with key faith leaders in the city. And if we have made those links out, I just think it would be foolish if we didn't use those. I at least would like to run this draft definition past them and just see if there's any serious objection to that, or hopefully have confirmation that there isn't. If we are consulting on the equality framework now and reporting back in March, one way forward would be just to defer this, be able to do that brief consultation with key faith leaders, and then bring this back with the equality framework as a package in March. And I would sort of wonder if the committee would support that as just a way forward, so we can draw in some of those issues there.
Okay, we'll come to that in a second. Councillor Austin.
Thanks. Yes, I just wanted to pick up on a point James makes. I think possibly it went a little bit further than intended. I wouldn't give Richard Dawkins a free pass, I've got to say, for some of the things that he's written and talked about. And particularly, he goes on about the number of Nobel Prizes offered in all different parts of the world and his reasons for that. Now, if you look back over centuries, you can see that the major centres of learning have moved around the world. But recently it's been in Europe, in the past it's been in China, in the past it's been at times in the Muslim world, and you can look at scholars like Ibn Khaldun for their contributions to science and philosophy. And so by taking a small part of that picture, Richard Dawkins, I think, is guilty at times of falling foul of bullet points 5 and 6 of the guidance here. So I think we just have to be a little bit careful in what might seem to be intended, or might seem to be as kind of legitimate criticism of ideas and doctrines can be used, I think, in an attempt to kind of diminish and dehumanise and be disrespectful without justification. So I just wanted to pick that up. I appreciate we're going into the weeds a little bit here, but I didn't want to leave that unaddressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's noted. Thank you. So look, we've got a proposal from Councillor Johnson to defer this. I mean, I'm open to views on this. What I would note, though, is that I think the full council has already passed this unanimously, and that full council resolution asked us to consider it at this committee and adopt it on behalf of the council. The equalities framework is out for discussion at the moment, and so I think there's a legitimate case for saying we go forward. I would just welcome any further views on that now that the proposal has been put forward. In which case, I suggest we move forward. Okay. So, on the point around the protected word, Councillor Johnson, are you moving that as an amendment? And David, your point earlier on, you were saying that the word protected is somewhat, if I understood it correctly, you were saying that the word protected is not necessarily needed because the free speech rights are already protected. Is that, or have I?
No, I think that's right. I don't think it's necessarily needed, unless James has any other view. I don't think it does any harm to add it in, even though I think it's not. I think if some people think it adds clarification, then it may assist.
Okay. Okay, in which case then, there's a suggested amendment to put in the word protected. Are people happy to support that word for reasons of clarity? Okay, so that would then read, the definition does not and will not be interpreted in such a way as to impinge on protected free speech rights of any person. Okay, and then are people happy to proceed with the recommendations as they are? Agreed? Okay, thank you everybody.
Sorry. Can we just dissent on that, on making the point that there should be consultation?
Understood.
I understand the views there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. So, the next agenda item, the proposed capital programme for 2024-25 for the SNR Policy Committee. Tom, thank you very much for joining us and for your patience this afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just introduce this very, very briefly. So, first, a real point of clarification just in terms of what this is and what it isn't, I guess. So, this is very much the strategy, capital strategy items that relate just to the essential compliance and maintenance part of the overall council strategy. So this is a report to Strategy and Resources Committee about the parts of the capital strategy that relate solely to this committee. Obviously, the overall capital strategy will come back and go through the full council in terms of sign off with the overall budget. So I just wanted to make that point initially. This isn't the council's entire capital strategy. In terms of the report itself, it's here to give you an opportunity to comment on and develop the capital strategy for your areas of responsibility. And the other principle is that the council's moving towards a rolling capital strategy, which doesn't just reflect a fixed point in time now. So we'll be proposing that the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee reviews its strategy regularly over the course of the year, so it considers emerging pressures, different funding streams, different grants and other things that might come through, and we will update that and bring that back for endorsement as we go through the year. It's very much a kind of an overarching strategy, so all the individual bits and the agreement to actually spend the money and on what to spend the money will go through the usual kind of governance channels, usually through Finance Subcommittee actually. So really that was all I was going to say this afternoon, Chair. Happy to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Any comments, observations on the report? Stunned in silence.
Almost.
Okay.
Just one.
Councillor Johnson.
Just a question. This issue about the local renewable energy fund that's been knocking about since we had it supported by full council and then brought to this committee in November 2022. So it says here, yes, several operational community sites will be identified to install renewable technology, focusing on solar PV and wind turbines, using the £3.5 million local energy renewable fund. Have we got any idea what sort of things it might be, what's being looked at, what's the progress on that? Can you say anything about that? Because that's just something we get asked about quite a lot, really.
It's not something I've got the detail on today, Councillor Johnson, but obviously I can bring some of that back either outside of the meeting or through this meeting and distribute that around if that would be useful.
Okay, thank you very much. Don't see anyone else, in which case then I'm going to move us straight through to recommendations, which would move so quick I haven't found the right page in the pack, so bear with me. We'll edit this bit out of the online webcast, everyone, don't worry. So the SNR committee is recommended to endorse the proposals set out in the report. Note that the proposals will be included in the draft capital strategy, which will go with the budget to full council in March. And if approved, officers will work with members, officers will work to develop the necessary implementation plans, and that approval for detailed proposals will, as per usual, be sought as part of the monthly capital approval cycle by the Finance Committee. Are members happy with those recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. Right, thank you, Tom. Okay, moving swiftly through then to item number 12, which is a very significant and positive agenda item for us to be taking on the Sheffield City Goals. And we're being joined by Angela Fox, Principal of Sheffield College, and Kate Josephs to introduce the report and to tell us about where we're up to with the City Goals process. So I will hand over to you both.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm going to start and then I'm going to hand over to Angela, but I'm going to also start by saying a huge thank you to Angela and a number of other leaders across the city, colleagues, partners who've participated in the work on the City Goals, which really is a project that the Council's been very pleased to support, but also I think really pleased to be a part of rather than in the lead. So I'll hand over to Angela shortly, but just to say I think the city owes a huge debt of gratitude to Angela and many others who've given a huge amount of their time to this. The papers before you, there's been lots and lots of consultation on this work, so hopefully no one in the room will be surprised or feel like they don't know what we're coming to talk about. But I wanted to just start by doing a bit of introduction in terms of why we felt as a city we needed these goals and this sense of a clear, coordinated plan for our place, the process that's been gone through to develop them, and then I'll hand over to Angela to talk about the goals themselves, how they're set out and next steps. So the genesis of the City Goals work came about through Sheffield City Partnership Board, which is, as many will know, is the partnership organisation across the city. It's chaired by Lord David Blunkett and involves many anchor institutions, as well as community groups, business groups, and the council as a participant. The genesis was from conversations coming out of the back of the COVID pandemic and a reflection that as a city we needed a clear coordinating sense of direction, a sense of where we wanted to be going forward. In some ways this harks right back to some of the conversations we had around public questions at the beginning of the meeting, where there was a palpable sense that we felt the city needed to come together around a shared set of a shared vision for the future. I suppose what's particularly, that's not unusual for cities. Successful cities in this country, around the world, tend very much to have what you might call, whether it's formally set out or whether it's felt, a sense of consistent shared, a sort of shared hymn sheet that partners sing from and speak to. That helps when it comes to attracting investment. It helps when it comes to supporting collaboration across organisations who are often incentivised individually to do different things. It helps us make really strong cases as places for funding from government, national and regional. So all of that is not unusual, but I think what we are really proud about as a city is that we've taken a slightly different approach to developing these goals than perhaps is what you might expect from other big core cities, and I think we know from talking to colleagues in other core cities that that's certainly the case. So the process to develop the goals started with a working group, which Angela, all those many months back, agreed to chair, and may well have regretted it, but the membership of that group is in the appendix to the paper. A number of pieces of work were initiated, and a very detailed economic evidence base was commissioned, and that's been shared with relevant committees in the last months ago, frankly, when it was created, but also a piece of work called Collaborative Conversations, which Voluntary Action Sheffield supported, that were aimed at creating the capacity in communities and within community groups to have discussions about the future of the city, recognising that we wanted to ensure that many voices were heard in developing and building the building blocks that would underpin the city's vision for the future. External support was brought in for some independent challenge, and particularly to hold a mirror up to approaches that we might take looking at cities around the world. And we really wanted the work to be co-owned, co-designed and informed by local insight and expertise. So extensive engagement was really vital to the creation of the goals. In the first engagement phase, there was a period of deep listening. There was a very broad survey with 1,600 responses, 17 collaborative conversation sessions and 28 workshops, including with youth clubs, Age UK and local community leaders. And that engagement phase created 4,000 data points, essentially to complement the economic evidence base and create the basis for a discussion around the sorts of goals we might want to set. The second engagement phase during August last year involved around 70 people with a range of expertise and from many different backgrounds, known as the Stewardship Group. And that group worked together to interpret all of the data and insights that had come out of the first phase and to form those into key themes, which you'll see in the goals themselves. And then the draft goals were tested with that group in 2 rounds before they were shared with the public. Finally, in November and December, version 3 of the city goals were shared with the public in a fully open consultation process and conversation process. 1,500 people completed a survey. Workshops were also arranged to target groups who otherwise tend to be underrepresented in online surveys. For example, including a session between Burton Street Foundation with Medina Mosque, All Saints School, the Sheffield Equality Partnership and Sheffield Social Enterprise Network. In all the way through, it's probably worth recognising and commending the role of elected members in this process. Workshops were held for all elected members in both public engagement phases. Officers went to the local area committees in September and October to highlight the public conversation. And Strategy and Resources Committee, this committee received an update in April and took part in a workshop themselves back in September. The final thing I guess I'll say is when we met last month, the committee signed off our draft council plan for consultation, and as we said at that point, that council plan really has been informed by the city goals. It's our articulation of how we as an organisation will make our contribution to the achievement of those goals, and that will be going they'll be coming back on post-consultation for sign-off. So what we feel is that the process we've undertaken has been something that's been different, that's been open, that's allowed for quite extensive iteration. It has taken time, but what we've ended up with is an articulation of the future we want to see for the city, which feels like a really true representation of a very diverse range of views and perspectives, all of which stem from, as again we heard at the beginning of the meeting, a real sense of love and ambition for the city. So I'll hand over to Andrew to talk about the goals themselves and how it's felt to lead it and what next.
Thank you very much. I think if I just pick up on that last point, I think that one of the guiding principles that we held on to throughout, and at times it was pretty tricky to hold on to, was that the process of building the goals ought to be broad and deep, that we ought to work as hard as we possibly could to reach as many communities as we could, to reach into the business community, to across all ages, across all parts of the city, and to maintain that as part of the key approach to this, so that we could get feedback from as many different groups, places, spaces as we possibly could. And whilst we could always do more, we did feel that we'd managed to stay broad, stay deep, and we had managed to talk to people who perhaps we may not have usually managed to bring forward to talk to us, which felt, that felt very good. And so what you can see, I'm reliably informed on page 154 of your pack. If it isn't, that would be me. It's the final iteration of the work that we undertook since last February in terms of building the words. So what you can see there is 6 stories that have been co-created, and then subsequently the 18 underpinning goals that the groups of people that we talked to felt best represented their Sheffield. It's the data points may not seem like, you're thinking, could they have done more? And we maybe could have, but in the end, what happened here was that in the second iteration, the business community told us, for example, that it needed to be a little more businessy. So in the public conversations, we worked harder on that piece than perhaps we had previously, without losing some of the community edge, for example. So what you have in front of you, we feel we've kind of gone broad, we've gone deep, and we've made sure to keep that live. The public conversations where we couldn't get people, the survey is one format. The workshops were very well attended, very well received, and were a range of people, so that was very good. What I would also say is that we also undertook some socialisation sessions. I don't know where we came up with the name for that, but anyway, we took the goals out and started to begin the process of socialising them with organisations and groups of people to see whether, if these were the goals as they landed, could you lend yourself to them? You know, would your organisation buy into this? Would your organisation be able to support this? And we did about probably 15 or maybe it's a little bit more than that with a range of organisations. So a small team of colleagues, for example, came to the college, and the Board of Governors at the college were had absolutely no problem with the goals at all. They're kind of, yeah, this is great. And what they could see was that as the college refreshes its strategy, which is over the next 12 months, it should reflect the goals more, and not without losing sight of obviously the purpose of the college. But realistically, there are 3 goals that we can easily lean into at the college, so we will build those through our strategy. And that was really the purpose of the socialisation, was not just to have something that people went, oh, right, thank you, but something that could be realised, something that could be enacted. So in terms of moving forward, I think the other thing that we really need to do is to make sure that we are, when we build a transition team, and if I can just be really clear about the transition team, there's a part of this which needs to take us through the next 6 to 12 months, so the goals are embedded into something which perhaps doesn't already exist, something that we don't already understand, which is the sort of the challenging part of this. And so the transition team will be a small team made up of slightly different parts, which will look to design, effectively to design some systems, processes, some governance models that will be proposed as the way to make the goals come to life. That's essentially what underpins this. The transition team isn't going to look to deliver the goals, to start to kind of realise actual. That's not the work of that team. That doesn't mean that there isn't an expectation that organisations don't begin to adopt and deliver the goals. But at the moment, there needs to be some more work. And an example of that is we've an ambition to establish neighbourhood conversations with some energy. And we don't really know what that means. So to gather a group of people who work out how to do that, not what to talk about, because the goals give us that, more so how to gather, how to you know, in common parlance, how to convene that, how to feed things in and out of that, and how to convene that around the goals. So the idea of the transition team is to build a small group of people who can shepherd us through that and gradually hand things over. In my vague plan, it's not as vague as it sounds, but nevertheless, the transition team would not last any more than 12 months because that's a long enough transition. But that would be the proposal for the next steps. The content of that team, there are some people who will do, some people who will build the designs, who will work out into communities, to business places, to build those systems, those processes, the how piece. We also will have a small steering group who will provide the support and challenge to that work to make sure we don't go off plan and we don't lose our sort of focus on that. And we also don't lose sight of Sheffield at the heart of this. And it doesn't just become a series of tasks, which I think is also quite important. In the end, what the transition team are led by, the underpinning notions are that we learn from what we already do as a city, so we do a lot. We're very good at an awful lot of things, so this isn't about losing things that already work. It could be building on them. It could be just formally adopting that as how we move forward. It's about understanding how other cities are becoming more resilient and if there's anything we can learn from other places. And it's about building new ways of collaborating many-to-many across the city so that the goals are realised within a time frame and we really do start to build on and transform Sheffield. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'd just like to say thank you from myself and from the committee to you for your work to lead this project through, to echo Kate's point, and also to a number of people who in the room who've put in an awful lot of work, and many people who aren't in the room as well. This has been a big collective endeavour to get us to this place. These are the city's goals, and many people in the city have been incredibly involved over the last year, really, to get us to this point. So, questions, comments, observations from committee members. I've saw Councillor Miskell first, and then I've got Councillor Otten, Councillor Mohammed. So I'll take those three first, and then we can have a discussion. Okay, there's quite a lot, so I'm going to ask people to keep their comments relatively brief.
Thank you very much for bringing the report today. You know, I was really struck when I read it right from the very start. I mean, it says, doesn't it? There are so many things happening in Sheffield which we should be proud of and talk about. And we know that we haven't been very good about talking about that in previous years. You know, I'm really struck as well in the presentation that you gave about just how many responses to the survey and the 28 workshops that were held. And I think that shows us, doesn't it, that actually this is a set of goals that is owned by the city and not simply by this organisation. And I think having Angela here actually is interesting, and it sets forth that actually this isn't simply about Sheffield City Council, this is about all our partners and all our citizens across the city. And I really thought it was interesting that it mentions that the city goals are our North Star, really. And I was really interested because Angela's here today, and we know that Sheffield College is a valued partner in our city. We know that it has 13,000 young people and adults as learners. And we know that the city goals are our North Star. In terms of those learners, those 13,000 young people, because you're in the business of changing lives, just as we are here, what does the city goals mean to young people? What will it allow, what will speaking as one voice as a city allow us to deliver with those young people? And what does it mean for you as a principal of such a valued organisation?
I'll take a couple of questions and come back if that's all right. Councillor Otten, then Councillor Mohammed, and then I think I've got after that Councillor Belbin, Councillor Agencio, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Williams. Is there anyone else? No. Okay, so we take 3 and then 4. So
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. It is a comment. So, I mean, if you'd asked me a year ago, could you get anybody to get members of the council, never mind members of the council and partners, to agree on a set of goals? I've said no, yeah, absolutely no chance. We all have different ideas. Some of us have good ideas, some have, other ideas. And so it is remarkable that we have this set of goals before us, and they are good goals, and I support the process, and I hope we can move on towards delivery. There is and I'm particularly grateful that some of the contributions I made in the consultation exercises that are on the theme of it's not just about what the city can do for us, but what we can do for the city and what the city can do for the world, what our place in the world is, have found their way in there, because I think this is really important. Because let's not forget, the city exists as it does because of our contribution to the world in the area of steel in particular. And if we didn't have that history of steel, the city would not exist in the way that it does today. And we must not slide into thinking that, offering something to the world is a thing of the past, because it's not. Today we have world-class offers in music, in advanced manufacturing, in education, in the culture and creative industries, and in others. And to be ambitious for the city, we have to show that we understand this, and we are going to nurture that offer and build on it and offer it to the world and make success of it. And if the city goals, because of the nature of them, can't quite do that, then I think it becomes a question of political leadership for the city. And it falls to you in particular, Tom. People look to you and say, do you understand the particular strengths of Sheffield and the particular opportunities, and do you have the ambition to deliver on that, or are you just, London's appointment to be leader of this council? I look forward to your response to that, because knocking on the doors in Sheffield, I get the strong sense people are crying out. They want not just the economic success that comes with Sheffield delivering things that the rest of the world wants and needs, like we did with steel, but also the sense of pride and purpose that comes with that. This is so important. So I hope you can deliver on that for me, Tom. I've turned it slightly away from the goals into you. I appreciate that. If not, I'm sure we could find somebody else. Thank you.
I'll come back to that in a minute, but we seem to have found the sort of holy trinity of agreement of myself, Councillor Otten, and Mr. Johnson in terms of wanting Sheffield to be a bigger, more ambitious city looking up and outwards. So I'll reflect on that and come back to you in a moment. But Councillor Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, some of the comments I was going to make have been covered, but nevertheless, I mean, I think they are the city's goals, not the city council's. I think we want to make that very clear, and therefore the ownership and delivery, which is going to be the really important bit, because bringing together a plan, I think the city desperately needed it, just as the council needed its own plan, and we're in the process of doing that, because it's not just for an internal document for me. Like Joe said, this is about external, reaching out beyond the city, beyond the county of Yorkshire, but actually the world, to be able to use our education institutions, whether it's the college, but also for me the universities, and the reach we have through them, i.e. the students that come here, to say this is a city that has a proud history, and as the peer review people said, we can note that, but actually it's what we do going forward now as a city, because we've got to, you know, play catch up with some of the other cities in the UK, and clearly we do have our strengths, and we've got to play on those strengths, and it is around manufacturing, the tech, etc. And yeah, there may well be people that might say, oh, I'm sure this goal could have been better written. I have to tell those people that when we were at the Circle, you know, there's been significant changes since. And I want to thank Angela and her colleagues for that, because, you know, there's this, to achieve these goals, we've been on a bit of a journey. We've had our say. I think the people of Sheffield have had the opportunity to have their say. I remember our like people, you know, there was a presentation by officers there to people have the opportunity, and what I want now people to is get behind it, help it make it better. If there are areas of improvement that you want to see, for me it'll be the route we take to achieve these goals. That's definitely for me a conversation to be had about how we get there. But we needed this. We needed a plan for the city urgently, and I think that as a council we need to get behind it, and I hope the city can get behind the goals and help us achieve them, and actually, you know, let's see what happens, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mohammed. What I suggest is I might let the conversation play out and then come back to Angela and Kate for reflections in a moment. So, Councillor Belbin, please.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with a lot of the comments that have gone before. I think the process or the journey that we've been on has been such a key part of what we've achieved here, and the fact that we can honestly say that thousands of people have contributed to what we have is so important, and it makes the next stage so much easier as well, that we're already, when we're going out and saying, okay, how can you as a citizen, how can you as an organisation within this city now contribute to this? How can you take these goals forward? That to some extent, there's thousands of people in the city that have already started thinking about that. I was at an organisation last night that did contribute to the process, and it was young people indeed who contributed to the process. And we were already starting to have a conversation about which part of the goals do we see this organisation contributing to. So I think that's really important, and does make it feel like, yes, it is a big collaborative piece of work, but I would go back to, and perhaps I think you just touched on it there, Councillor Rotham, that doesn't mean we don't need leadership around this as well. The leadership of organisations like the council and some of our other big anchor institutions is still really important to take this forward, and that having a collaborative approach to things doesn't mean the abdication of leadership.
Thank you, Councillor Belbin. Councillor Agencia.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to everybody who's contributed, and the work that the people that put them together have done. From you know, the point of view of an adoptive Sheffielder, and I say this, you know, this is my home. I think it's great to have a vision that is shared more widely, and I think it's about, I've said this a lot, I come from a bit larger city from where I'm from, and the thing that is always, you know, kind of confused me about Sheffield is the fact that there is so much good stuff happening in Sheffield, and so many beautiful things in Sheffield, but people tend to be really kind of blasé about it, as if it's not important. So I think this is about being self-assured about all the really good things and good that happen and that there are in Sheffield, without being arrogant. And it's about understanding our weaknesses, so being humble, but without being defeatist. And I think it's just that kind of finding that balance. I think each individual organisation who is adopting the goals and has shared the goals need to then take ownership and have a plan of how they're going to deliver them, and need to be accountable as well for if we as an organisation or as organisation don't deliver, as in we don't act in the spirit of the goals. I think that's really, really important as well in the long term. And I know that, for example, we're looking at I'm the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, and we're looking at our strategy. We need to renew the strategy, and the goals, of course, are on the agenda, because we couldn't write a strategy for the next few years without looking at how it fits in what we're doing. And I think we need to remind ourselves, as the, especially the big anchor organisations need to remember that the goals are important because they are the city goals. They're not an organisational kind of strategy. So thank you very much for bringing them over. And, we're on the up, aren't we? I've been wanting to say that for weeks.
It's been said. Councillor Williams and then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for bringing this to where we are. I mean, I shared some of the journey, and it's evolved dramatically from where we were before. I think one of the challenges going forward will be ensuring that it remains relevant to all the residents of Sheffield. Looking through the document, I noticed Appendix 2 talks about the future and a team of people who are going to discuss the future city goals delivery. Bearing in mind the political balance we enjoy at the moment on the council, I question whether it's right that both of our representatives come from the same political party. I think that doesn't necessarily reflect what the council is currently doing, and that is not a criticism of the individuals. I just think it's the principle. So could we possibly have a look at that?
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks. There's been lots of valid comments made around the room, so I just won't repeat those. Only say thanks to the two people in the hot seat, Kate and Angela today, and the cast of thousands behind them. I mean, I think it's been really good. I actually said several times, I think what was important about this was the process of the piece of work and the engagement rather than the outcome, because, imagine the idea of just trying to agree a statement that everyone in the city agrees with. But actually, I'm quite impressed with the outcome as well. So thanks, nice work.
Thank you. Let me just touch on Councillor Otten's point. In so doing, endorse Councillor Argenzio's point about Sheffield. I think, I've been a resident of this city for 18 years, and I've always been somewhat frustrated as a resident that Sheffield defined itself against what it didn't want to be, rather than what it did want to be. We don't want to be like Leeds, we don't want to be like Manchester, we definitely don't want to be like London, but we never quite answered the question of what does Sheffield want to be. And I think it reflects that as a city, through industrial decline, it's lost confidence. And I think now we are at a place where we have a coherent city narrative and a set of goals that we can all collectively stand behind, that confidently and proudly is about our place in the world today and in the future. This isn't about looking back, this is squarely looking forward, building on the terrific strengths that we have, and a number of sectors have been mentioned already. But people do want to hear a positive narrative about their city that says, we are proud to tell the world that we're from Sheffield, and tell the world that the great things are happening here. That there is a lot of modesty. It's one of our, what we love about this place. But I think the balance has been a bit too much towards the modesty in the past. It's time to be more confident about what's going on here and to shout about it. it's been remarked that, we're a city on the up. And if we're not telling the story of that and saying that, we have turned the corner when it comes to things like the city centre, that we are recognising that we've got significant investment going into Attercliffe and the investment zone is really kicking off, that we're the outdoor city and people are recognising that these are great strengths and they want to be part of it. If we're not all standing behind a positive narrative, forward-looking narrative about our city, who else is going to? We can't be critical when people say, well, we don't hear about Sheffield, or, we can't be critical when we get looked over for opportunities. And I think when, we need to be thinking bigger and bolder and more outwards and comparing ourselves to cities around the world. And I think this City Goals process has rightly drawn on good practice of what confident 21st century cities are doing, and we need to squarely put ourselves in that situation and seize on opportunities that come our way. And I'll give a shout out to Gary, who's been sitting patiently, because when an opportunity like the Mobos comes around and we can say, right, we want the spotlight of the world on Sheffield, we've grabbed that opportunity, and in 2 weeks' time, that is what will be happening. The world's talent will be coming to Sheffield, and it's important and incumbent on us that we make sure that there's a legacy coming out of those awards ceremony, and I'm sure that there will be. And it's just a great example of the way that there's a huge amount of positivity about our city at the moment, and it comes from being confident and proud about our strengths and not resting on our laurels and saying we want to do bigger and better. So I think this has been, the cross-party support for this is really welcome and sets us up very, very well for now adopting these goals and going forward in a confident manner.
Okay, I'm going to give some of this my best shot. If I miss anything, Kate's going to finish. That was good, wasn't it? Deft. So first of all, young people. So it's a privilege for me, but to bring young people into the conversation about the goals was brilliant, and particularly young people from the college, because the journey of the college is known, and it's probably been too quiet also, in the same way that you just articulated. So the students at the college had a big say in this, amongst other young people groups. They had some particular views, they had some goals that they were very, very clear had to be articulated, which was really good. And they're not surprising, actually. What they wanted to talk about was not particularly surprising. I think what's really important going forward is one of the work streams in the transition is to build a mechanism, to design something that enables young people to be heard and to engage properly, to be decision makers in their own place. And so just as an example of how much, at times, there's been some fun in this. So we lovingly called this the Next Generation Assembly, and we got absolutely battered for that, to be truthful. So they were the now generation as well as the future generation, we'll be clear on that. And what's an assembly anyway? You go and you sit on the floor and you get told, when I went, all right, stop. It's not that. So there's a real appetite from young people, and so specifically from a college point of view, my board are very keen to adopt 3 of the goals that they want to propose to students as part of building the strategy. So I'm delighted, because this is proper empowerment. This is what we should be doing. We should be listening to the people who'll be running the city in 5, 10, 15 years from whatever vantage point. I think that's great. I suppose I need to reiterate a little bit that some of the work of the transition team is about working through what new governance with a small g, not kind of, what that would look like in a different type of, in a different place if the goals are to become something really powerful. So how bold and brave are we going to be with this? And if you really were going to embed young people into decision making, how would we do that and make that a real thing rather than just a listening piece, but actually letting young people loose a little bit? How would we build through so that our ambition to be better or to do better is lived and shared by a wider group of people? That ambition is definitely there. That was one of the most powerful things that came through building the goals, is that the people who spoke the words and who told us all the things they told us, whatever we write down, the ambition to do better is there. And it's, yes, there is still a little bit of kind of parent-child relationship. So to bring some of that to adult, we need to work on that, but it's there. So it's pushing on an open door from the work we've done. Really quickly, we're working on how to, we're calling it pledges at the moment, but we're working on how to work through where people are going to adopt. So you know, where you can actually collect that kind of, we're adopting this is how we're adopting it, this is where it's going to appear, this is how we're going to, you know, how we're going to be held accountable, responsible for the goals. Because more than people just going, we like those, hands up, we actually want people to say what that means for them. So I'm absolutely delighted that the Health and Wellbeing Board is building that through, because that's a proper pledge. That's an active pledge rather than just, we like these. So that I think is really, really good, and I agree it needs leadership, which is part of that design process. And I think that's probably, do you want to carry on?
I'll say a few things, but I think you've covered everything really, really well. Just on a point, so Councillor Williams, just to your point around representation, to be clear that the list of names that are in the appendices of the paper are list attendees at meetings that we've described. They don't describe the broad range of people that I think everybody wants to be involved in these next stages. I'm grateful to, well, we're all grateful, I think, to Angela for carrying on providing leadership for this work as we move into this transition phase. And part of the task that everybody's mindful of is how do we make sure that we're continuing to bring new voices, new leadership, and thinking broadly about leadership, recognising that the young people that Angela talked about in Sheffield College are leaders. This isn't just about people who have, you know, formal leadership roles. So really, it will be really important for us as a council to think about how we're ensuring that we, through the council plan and through our governance, are holding true to our, well, the decision that you are about to make about whether we're happy to adopt these goals as our North Star for the next period. The only other thing I wanted to say was just to pick up on some of what Councillor Argencio said and Councillor Otten said about what does adoption and accountability really mean, and that idea of what we can do for the city. And I think, again, linking to the process, this has been a really important learning process for many of us. There's been lots of points during this year, I think, where we felt this is a bit flaky and how's it all going to turn out, and we've had to hold a level of uncertainty. But we're also really conscious that as a city and as a world, we're facing some very, very enormous transitions, and there is a lot of uncertainty for us to be dealing with. So that idea that we need everybody to be stepping into leadership, everybody, many different organisations to be thinking actively about what they'll do with this. And as an example, I'll share, I and colleagues presented this to a very large group of head teachers from across Sheffield, along with colleagues from Learn Sheffield a few weeks ago. And the first question I was asked was, so what do you want us to do with this yet then? And my response was, what do you want to do with it? And I think that has got to be where, you know, we've got a great example of leaders throughout our city working with children and young people, incredible experience, and that sort of sense of we want organisations to take these goals and run with them and imagine what they want to do with them, and it not having to be dictated by anybody with I think that's really, really important. So yeah, so just to say again, a big thank you, and hopefully that's enough of a whistle stop to enable the committee to consider the recommendations.
Which we will now do. Thank you very much. So we have some recommendations before us, which are that we note the progress by which the city goals have been developed, endorse the finalised sets of city goals, note the links, strategic links between city goals and future council strategies, including our current draft council plan. Note the intention to continue ongoing work with partners to develop the delivery structure we've just heard about, and note that we'll get an update back to this committee about progress in 6 months' time. Are people happy with those recommendations? Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, the final agenda on our item on our agenda is a closed item. So we will just pause the webcast. We'll do it in a bit more of an ordered manner than earlier on.